For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. The injury report is a tool that tells you the injury status of all the players on the team and whether or not you can expect them to play. If a player is not on the injury report, it means that they're fully healthy and they're ready to go. Now, they changed the designations on the report, so there's no such thing as probable or doubtful anymore. But if a player is listed as questionable, it's a question of whether he's going to play. He might play, or he might not play. It might be a game-time decision, or it might be too soon to tell, or it might be one of those things where he's going to play barring anything insane, but because he technically suffered an injury, he has to be placed on the report. And of course, if a player is listed on the report as out, then, shocker, he's going to be out. He's too banged up to play. He's going to miss the game, and you can expect to see him on the sidelines or watching the game from the comfort of somewhere not on the field. But either way, he's not going to be suiting up and walking out there. And the injury report is a pretty big deal. It's a big deal for fans who might have a betting interest in the game, as well as a rooting interest in the game. It's a big deal for the coaches, who may have to game plan a different way. Maybe the starting quarterback was a pocket passer, but now he's on the injury report, and the backup quarterback is way more of a scrambler, so you have to adjust. And because of this, you cannot tamper with the injury report. It is not a gamesmanship tool, it is a tool to be taken seriously. And if you mess around with it by listing guys as out, and then they go out on the field and play, or if you mess around with it by not reporting players, you're going to get penalized pretty harshly. Heck, we saw that earlier in the 2023 season. The Atlanta Falcons didn't put running back Bijan Robinson on the injury report for a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He barely played in the game despite being an incredible running back, and as a result, the NFL fined the Falcons $75,000 and fined Arthur Smith $25,000. It might be chump change for both of those groups, seeing as the Falcons are worth $4.7 billion, and Arthur Smith is the son of Frederick W. Smith, the founder of FedEx, who is worth $5.4 billion. But the NFL does issue punishments if you violate the report, which is why teams don't mess around with it. And yet, for some reason, in 1965, Chicago Bears head coach George Halas, prior to this game that you've been watching this whole time, thought that the Baltimore Colts were going to cheat and were going to manipulate the injury report for some strange reason. Halas accused the Colts of cheating and saying that they were trying to throw the Bears off of their game, and that this was one of Don Shula's dirty tricks. And the Colts just stood there confused, like, what are you talking about? You've seen that trope in just about every TV show. One person thinks the other is lying and is playing a trick, and the other person is telling the truth and is confused as to why the person possibly thinks that way. And that's exactly what happened during this game regarding the play of a prominent yet extremely underrated defensive end. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the strangest cheating controversy of the 1965 NFL season. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and how the game itself played out, we need some context to understand the importance of this game right here, as well as the player in question that the Colts were potentially not going to have for the game. It's December 5th, 1965. It's week 12 of the NFL season, and as we're heading into December and heading for the home stretch, we've got a big game on our hands in Baltimore in the Western Conference between the Baltimore Colts and the Chicago Bears. Yes, a Baltimore team was in the Western Conference, because that makes sense, but that's besides the point. This was the biggest game in the entire season up until this point, and I don't say that lightly. In one corner, you have the Colts, sitting in first place with a 9-1-1 record, thanks to the number 2 offensive football, having scored 342 points, or over 31 points per game, the number 2 defensive football, having allowed just 212 points, or roughly 19 points per game, and having the best point differential in football at plus 130, and the only point differential in the triple figures. In the other corner, you had the Bears, sitting in third place with a 7-4 record, thanks to the number 3 offensive football, having scored 318 points, or 29 points per game, and having the second best point differential in football at plus 87. These were two absolute heavyweights, and back in 1965, only the winner of each conference made it to the playoffs to play in the NFL Championship. There was no postseason, unless there was a tie atop the standings, in which case, a tiebreaker game would be held. But other than that, if you weren't first, you were straight out of luck. For that reason, this game was massive. If Chicago lost this game, they dropped to 7-5, and with Baltimore improving to 10-1-1, the Colts would be up by 3.5 games with 2 games left. So Chicago would be mathematically eliminated, and the Colts would be one step closer to their second straight appearance in the NFL Championship. However, if Chicago won this game, with Baltimore at 9 wins, Chicago at 8 wins, and the Green Bay Packers at 8 wins entering their game, things would get a heck of a lot more interesting, which the NFL needed, seeing as in the other conference, the Cleveland Browns were 9-2 while every other team was below 500. So that race was over. They needed the Western Conference to be good. This also meant that this was one of the few times where Packer fans were actively rooting for Chicago to win, which felt dirty, but it was absolutely necessary. And like I said before, the Colts were an amazing team that had the number 2 defense in football. That's how they got to this point where they had the best winning percentage of any team in the league, and how they got to this point where they were top 5 against the run in every major category, so yards, touchdowns, and yards per carry. They had a defensive line full of great players like Billy Ray Smith, who started 145 games in the league and would later on in his career be named an AP second-team All-Pro, and Lou Michaels, a 2-time Pro Bowler and a player who received votes for MVP just a few years prior in 1963. But the best player on the defensive line? Well, that was this man right here, Ordell Braase. He's not a Hall of Famer by any means, but you could make the legitimate argument that Braase is one of the most underrated players in Colts history and in NFL history. Over his career, he had 5 seasons with double-digit sacks. Unofficially, he ended his career with 80 sacks, and he made 2 Pro Bowls with the Colts and received 2 second-team All-Pro nominations by the Associated Press in 1966 and 1967. By this point in his career, Braase was a mainstay on the Colts, having started every game for the team since 1962, and recording 6 sacks, which would wind up being the second most on the team that season. At 33 years old, he was showing no signs of slowing down. As one writer said on how good he was, let's play word association. The name is Ordell Braase. If you are like me, you immediately say pro football player, rock and sock, crunch, steady, always in the background, solid old pro, and all that. That's Ordell Braase. Earlier in the 1965 season, during a convincing 38-7 win against Washington, for his efforts, Braase was named the AP Defensive Player of the Week. Said his head coach, Don Shula, on how important he was to the success of the team and the defense, Braase has played well all year. And when the Bears and Colts met earlier in the season, the Colts won 26-21, thanks to a great performance by their defensive line, which sacked quarterback Rudy Bukic 5 times. When Bukic was asked after the game about the best player on the field and who impacted him the most, Bukic immediately responded by saying, Braase played a great game. You get the idea. Braase was a great player. He was a player that the Bears knew they had to stop. And he was a player that the Bears weren't necessarily sure if they'd be able to stop, considering how well he played not just in the first meeting back in Chicago a month ago, but all season for that matter. However, it seemed like the Bears were going to catch a big break. Because in the must-win game coming up, this player right here, the man you've been watching, Ordell Braase, he was probably going to be out. Back in Week 9, when the Colts defeated the Vikings 41-21 in the famous Gary Quazzo game, Braase suffered a pulled groin muscle near the end of the first half. While Braase was able to finish the game, the groin injury was not getting any better. If anything, it was getting worse. Braase was a tough man. Again, this was a player who had started every game for the team since 1962, but this injury was too much for him to handle. On Thanksgiving Day, when the Colts took on the Detroit Lions, this man right here, Ordell Braase, for the first time all season, would not be out on the field. Now, there are some reports that said he played the game but only played 2 snaps. Some reports that said he didn't play the game. Either way, he was not out there for a long time. He was sidelined with that groin injury, and the Colts struggled as a result. Their usually good run defense was porous, with Lions running back Amos Marsh rushing for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns on 6.4 yards per carry in a 24-24 tie that the Colts really had to work for, seeing as the Colts trailed 24-10 going into the 4th. Detroit called 36 running plays on that day, and 24 went to the right side, as in the side that Braase usually patrolled and operated on. If it was ever apparent that the Colts needed Braase back to win the Western Conference, it was that game right there. If you were a Colts fan, you were hoping that Braase would be able to suit up for the next game against the Chicago Bears, and you thought that he had a pretty decent shot of doing so, considering the fact that the Lions game was on Thanksgiving, which was November 25th, and the Bears game was on December 5th, so the Colts had 10 days of rest. A week and a half of rest should hopefully make things better and allow Braase to play. But alas, it did not. Because the day before the game, the Colts officially ruled Braase out, as he would miss his 2nd straight game with a groin injury. They'd have to find a way to win without him, but seeing as he was listed on the injury report as doubtful, and now he was out, this was confirmation of what we had a pretty good feeling about. This injury to Braase was worse than anyone thought. Which raises the question, how did Bears head coach George Halas react to the news that this man right here, Ordell Braase, would not be able to go for this all-important clash? Simple. He accused the Colts of cheating and said there's no way it's true. Seriously, for all his importance to the game, because the NFL does not exist without Halas, and because he might be the most influential and important figure in the history of professional football, Halas was definitely a little bit out there at times. He infamously proposed to the NFL that to raise money for cancer research following Vince Lombardi's premature death, that he be allowed to bet on his team to win the division. Seriously. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But even though the Colts ruled Braase out of the game, and flat out told the NFL, and told the Bears, and told the media, and told their fans that he would not be playing, Halas accused the Colts of playing tricks. He accused them of playing mind games, and thought that this was just a clever little ploy to try and throw the Bears off their game. Said Halas, for some bizarre reason, I predict that when we arrive in Baltimore Memorial Stadium on Sunday, we'll find all Colts hale and hearty. We're certain they're 100%. There's no question in my mind that Braase will play against us. He may have a pulled groin muscle, but he's had 10 days of rest since the game in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day. 10 days makes a difference. We'll proceed on the assumption that the Colts are in fine shape. Seriously, Halas was accusing the Colts of lying. The Colts flat out told everyone that could hear, from the Bears to their own teammates to the league and the media, we're not playing Ordell Braase because he's not healthy and is still hurt. And Halas was out there saying, liars, you guys are liars. I don't believe you one bit. This is one of your dirty little tricks. And guess what? We're not falling for it. We're staying ahead of the game. And you can only imagine what the Colts were possibly thinking about all of this. Why the heck would we do this? Seriously, why the heck would we do this? What is the incentive here? What is the end game? What is the goal? Number one, lying about the injury report is illegal. We don't want to suffer repercussions. We don't want to get hit with a penalty or anything along those lines. There's no reason to do that. The deterrence factor is there as it is. But number two, why the heck would we lie? We literally beat you guys last time. It's like if you beat someone in a game of Madden, then you have a rematch, and you let your opponent know before the match, hey, just to let you know, we have to make the quarter short because I have to leave in a few minutes to go somewhere. And you accuse that person of lying to gain a competitive advantage for some reason. It just doesn't make sense. Plus, in the eyes of the Colts, it's not as though we're trying to hide Braase. It's not as though he's a gadget player or we have secret plays. He's an offensive end, and on every play, he's going to do what every other defensive end tries to do. And that is to get the man with the ball, whether it be the quarterback or the running back, and blow up the play at or near the line of scrimmage. We literally have no reason to do this. It would be like if the Houston Texans announced before the game that Will Anderson would be out. What possible incentive would they have to lie about that? Simple. They wouldn't have any. It's not like a team with prime Peyton Manning and prime Michael Vick, so two completely different styles of quarterback, where one takes off and runs and the other does not. You're preparing for the Colts the same way, with or without Ordell Braase. And this is going to come as a shock to you, but for this game right here that you're watching, guess who was not on the field for the Colts? Guess who was not out there? You guessed it, none other than Ordell Braase. Turns out, the Colts were telling the truth. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thought that except for, I don't know, literally everyone except George Halas? It's like the shocked Pikachu meme when Halas found out that Braase was legitimately hurt and was going to be out of the game, even though everyone knew this information and Halas just refused to believe it, despite the fact that the Colts had quite literally no incentive to lie about this. Good job, George. Now, when it comes to the game between these two teams behind me right here, as you probably could have told from the highlights, the Bears ended up going on the road and defeating the Baltimore Colts, winning that game and shutting them out by a final score of 13-0. Johnny Unitas suffered an injury for the Colts, which would sort of derail their season the rest of the way and derail their offense, although they did still finish tied for first, making it to a Western Conference playoff against the Green Bay Packers. The Chicago Bears, despite their best efforts, would end the season 9-5 and would miss the postseason. Not a bad record by any means, but considering the fact that they started the season 0-3, they were always going to be behind the 8 ball. Still, they did win 9 games, and one of those games was that game against the Colts, where everyone knew that Braase wasn't going to play, except for George Halas for some reason. Although for what it's worth, Braase did play every other game the remainder of the season after that. Yes, the Bears won this game right here 13-0. And yes, it kept their season alive at the time. But the Bears definitely looked like complete fools on this day. Here's a word to the wise. If someone tells you something, they tell everyone the same thing. They will get punished severely for lying, and they have no incentive at all to lie about this. Odds are, there's a pretty good chance that they're telling the truth, and that the information is credible and reliable. Odds are, they're not lying and they're not cheating. So to accuse them of that would seem rather insane. Why George Halas didn't seem to think that here, I don't know, but he did. And the NFL world was insane as a result. Because on this day in 1965, when it came to the handling of the opposition's injury report, the Bears were unbearable. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.